Evangelion 3.0, You Cannot Redo, was released in November 2012, and over 10 years later, it's finally my time to talk about it. It is the full realization of what the rebuild of Evangelion is and what it was always meant to be. This is when the wool was pulled from our eyes to reveal the single greatest cinematic slap to the face. Okay, maybe it was more of a punch to the face, but to understand it as a film, we need to go back to before the rebuilds even existed. Back to 1980 and 90s Japan, and an anime fandom that Hideaki Anno disagreed with. In April 1995, as part of an interview for New Type, a monthly anime magazine, Anno had this to say: "I wonder if people who are over 20 years old and like robot anime are really happy. If they never knew that there is a greater happiness, they might be happy for the rest of their lives. But I've begun to question that kind of happiness." So it's only natural that when it came time for him to create Evangelion, he created something different from what he was seeing. Neon Genesis is a series that comes from a man who was extremely depressed. By Anno's own admission, he was simply not dead. But it was also coming from someone who understood the anime fandom. Hideaki Anno is a nerd, even his wife thinks so. He knows this stuff, and it's why his writing has a powerful authenticity. As a result, the original series and the end of Evangelion work as both love letter to and parody of Anno's favorite shows and movies. All of this was an attempt to teach the audience the dangers of escapism and the importance of connecting with others and living life in full.
今の自分が絶対じゃないわ。後で間違いに気づき、後悔する。私はその繰り返しだった。ぬか喜びと自己嫌悪を重ねるだけ。でも、その度に前に進めた気がする。
But nothing really changed. Evangelion was relentlessly praised and commercialized, and the anime industry remained as it was. Its fans continued to be immature escapists who only got worse. As Anno observed an unchanging industry, he took it upon himself to change things. As early as 2002, he began gearing up for a remake, though he got caught up working on a few other projects like 2004's Cutie Honey. Eventually, though, he released Evangelion 1.0, You Are Not Alone. And it's got a lot of really cool stuff. It's HD widescreen, it's updated animation, it's gorgeous. But I often find that the movie fails to be as deconstructive as the original show. This is where things start to unravel with the rebuilds. In the original episode 6 of Neon Genesis Evangelion, Misato never takes Shinji to see Lilith. She does not give him a rousing speech before the fight either, he just goes out there. Likewise, you might remember that in the second episode of the show, Anno cuts around the fight with Sachiel to make the episode non-linear, which creates mystery and intrigue. But in 1.0, you see the whole fight play out completely normally, and I think these changes are a really succinct way of viewing the whole of 1.0 and 2.0. Anno sacrificed some of the darker tone and atmosphere, as well as bits of the avant-garde storytelling to increase the accessibility of the franchise. The movies are still well crafted, because Anno is just one of the best to ever do it. The sound design and score, the jaw-dropping visuals, etc., they're all still here. But the complex and at times difficult to watch presentation of the original is essential to what makes it Evangelion. One of the most iconic moments in the show is one where nothing happens for over a minute. Taking these things away make 1.0 and 2.0 Evangelion for people who don't like Neon Genesis, or Evangelion rebuilt for a more childish and immature audience, not ready to be challenged. Now, you may have noticed that in this video about You Cannot Redo, I haven't brought it up in about 644 words or so, and that's because I think it's totally different from these other two. It's a complete left-field gut punch of a movie. Considering the interpretation of You Are Not Alone and You Cannot Advance as the simplest possible version of Evangelion, You Cannot Redo is Evangelion at its most confusing and disorienting, and I love this movie for it. So instead of reviewing this movie like the others, think of this video as a critical defense of it. I want to talk about all the stuff people didn't like about it and why I think it works much better than they think. One of the big things people hated about 3.0 was the way it introduced all sorts of new lore and ideas without really explaining any of it. But frankly, if you watch the movie, you'll see that this really isn't a problem. Anno will often have a character drop a gibberish line and then explain it almost immediately after, either through direct definition or by offering enough context clues that it becomes pretty clear what the characters are saying.
ここじゃ L 結界密度が強すぎて助けに来れないわ。リリンが近づけるところまで移動するわよ。よっ。
So now you might be wondering, why? Well, it's like I said earlier, the whole series is really inspired by Anno's favorite shows and movies, and that, of course, includes the rebuilds. The ending of Evangelion 2.0, for example, is a near shot-for-shot remake of an episode from Ultraman Nexus from 2004. The idea I'm striking at here is that, like in the original show, a lot of the lore and things people have latched onto with this franchise are more set dressing and homage than important material worth paying attention to. Anno takes it to its upper limit here, throwing around so much that he really forces you to detach yourself from the lore and instead connect with the characters. In 3.0, Anno is far more focused on conveying the messages of Evangelion than exploring things like its setting, because ultimately those don't matter.
ああ、すべてインフィニティのなり損ないたちだ。君は気にしなくていい。
In the end, 3.0 is a very tragic film that really asks one question. When you can't redo, what can you do? And people really hated that question, because they didn't like that Shinji's big moment at the end of 2.0 actually had terrible consequences. A lot of people think it's needlessly mean-spirited to him. But to repeat myself, that's part of the point. Audiences so desperately wanted Shinji to get in the robot and go out there and fight, so Anno gave them that. But you aren't supposed to want Shinji to get in the robot. You're supposed to realize that it is a horribly traumatic and deeply wrong thing to make children fight God, and desperately want a brighter future for him. It's a cruel, ironic twist on the last movie's ending that forces Shinji down a darker path. He comes face to face with the consequences of his actions. He meets people whose lives he directly impacted, and yes, they hate him, but Eva is known for writing its characters in the most human way possible, and after being put through hell and back, it surprises me that people expected our characters to be casual about it. All of the people on the Wunder probably lost their families because of him, and are now locked into an uphill war. It's not odd at all that they're hostile towards Shinji, even if he didn't intend to do what he did. But even though the movie forces Shinji to face that hatred, it never says he cannot be redeemed. He cannot redo, but that doesn't mean this is the end.
ただ、償えない罪はない。希望は残っているよ。どんな時にもね。
In fact, Anno makes that idea explicit throughout the movie. Here, in the middle of their game, Fuyutsuki just says this.
世界を崩すことは造作もない。だが、作り直すとなるとそうもいかん。時と同じく世界に可逆性はないからな。人の心にも。
Even more prominently, Shinji directly asks Kaoru what he can do, and just as he leaves Shinji, Kaoru says this.
シンジ君は安らぎと自分の場所を見つければいい。縁が君を導くだろう。
3.0 is a movie that deeply believes that despite our mistakes and the pain we have wrought on others, a way forward is possible. That by continuing and trying to live, we can find purpose and meaning and connection, and maybe even forgiveness. The movie shows that Misato, Ritsuko, and even Asuka, the only characters who could possibly understand Shinji, do not really hate him. Misato is given a full 15 seconds to kill him, and she is incapable of pulling the trigger. because she knows he didn't mean to do what he did, and because she still cares about him. Asuka goes back and saves his life after the climax of the movie, dragging him along. Not just after near third impact, but after he had just done the fourth impact. Anno refuses to abandon Shinji, and in doing so, refuses to abandon hope. In a review for Anime News Network, Zach Birchie called You Cannot Redo as challenging and emotionally intense as the best stuff Evangelion has to offer, and I think this is one of the best ways to explain it. 3.0 clearly functions in the same way that the original TV ending and the end of Evangelion do. It exists as a way for Anno to give the audience his message in the most direct way possible. It isn't quite the most simple or easy to follow in terms of its narrative, but it functions as such a terrific meta-commentary and reiteration of the franchise's core concepts that it makes a genuinely perfect follow-up to 2.0. This being said, I think it's also a reiteration of Evangelion in that it absolutely isn't for everyone, but I'd really encourage fans to just try it one more time and give it a rewatch. And then come back here and comment about how I was right so I can justify being pretentious on YouTube. Or comment if you disagree. I still get engagement on the YouTube algorithm either way. Anyways, that's gonna wrap it up for today. If you liked this video, make sure to leave a like, and if you loved it, consider subscribing. Thank you all so much. Ren Recorders, peace out, and make sure to take care of yourself.